Did you know that hundreds of millions of years ago, true terror came not from dinosaurs or sea predators, but from creatures with cutting wings and sharp jaws that flew and crawled? Get ready to discover how giant insects ruled the Earth in a forgotten chapter of our planet's history. On a planet very different from the one we know today, insects were the kings of the skies and the lords of the forests. Imagine a dragonfly with a wingspan of 70 centimeters, larger than a modern falcon, patrolling the skies like a lethal predator. Or envision a 7-foot-long millipede gliding across a forest floor so dense and wet it seemed like a boiling cauldron of life. This was the world of the Carboniferous period, an era of transformations so grand that they redefined the limits of what was possible. To understand the magnitude of these giants, we need to look at what we know today. Insects, small and often ignored, are the most numerous animals on the planet. More than 1 million species have already been cataloged, and scientists believe there are millions more, patiently waiting to be discovered. Despite their abundance, most of us consider them inconspicuous creatures, hiding in dark corners or gliding quickly out of sight. But there was a time when these same creatures didn't need to hide. They were giant, dominant, and in many cases deadly. This prehistoric world began to take shape around 359 million years ago, long before dinosaurs even existed. The Carboniferous period was a turning point in Earth's history, a time when climatic, geological, and biological changes converged to create the perfect conditions for the emergence of giants. Supercontinents were forming, the climate was tropical and uniform, and vast tropical forests spread along the equator, creating lush and diverse ecosystems. But what exactly made this time so special? Why have insects, creatures we now associate with tiny sizes, become so colossal? The answer starts in the air they breathed. During the Carboniferous, oxygen levels in the atmosphere were much higher than today, around 35% compared to 21% today. This excess oxygen not only fueled the insect's metabolism, allowing them to grow beyond what we can imagine, it also created an environment where life flourished in extraordinary ways. But not everything was perfect in this world of giants. Insects faced their own challenges, and the adaptations that made them so successful also made them vulnerable. They lived in a delicate balance, dependent on dense and complex ecosystems, where each species played a crucial role. Still, these beings dominated the planet in a way that no other group of animals had done before. They didn't just survive, they prospered. Meganuras, giant dragonflies, cut through the skies like relentless predators, while Arthroplurus, giant millipedes, crawled through the forests like true titans. There were no competitors in the skies or earthly predators capable of threatening these creatures in their prime. However, the real question is, what happened to them? Why did these Carboniferous titans disappear, leaving behind only fossils and fragments of a lost time? This is the mystery that we will begin to unravel. What we know so far is that these giants of the past left us more than fossilized bones and fossilized jaws. They left us lessons about how the planet evolves, about how the right conditions can create life forms that defy all expectations. And as we explore the next part of this story, we will uncover what made this world such fertile ground for the emergence of such fascinating creatures. Now imagine an Earth completely different from the one you know. There were no ice-capped mountains or vast deserts. The planet was an immense, pulsating tropical paradise. The question is, how did this world, so perfect for life, end up creating the conditions for the emergence of true giants? About 359 million years ago, Earth was undergoing changes that would shape its future forever. Imagine a giant puzzle. The tectonic plates, large land masses that form the continents, moved slowly, coming together into a supercontinent called Pangaea. But, like all significant changes, this did not happen without conflicts. Lands collided with unimaginable force, creating immense mountain ranges, while vast floodplains emerged, transformed into rich, lush swamps. These swamps were true cauldrons of life. Dense forests, made up of giant ferns and towering trees, formed a landscape so different that we could barely imagine it. In the midst of all this, incredible innovations in plant evolution emerged. Seeds that could be dispersed by the wind, allowing new species to colonize distant territories, further expanding the diversity of this green paradise. Now stop and think. Today, when we look at a forest, we see trees that can live for centuries, but in the Carboniferous, these trees died in a rapid and constant cycle. When they fell, they formed layers upon layers of organic matter that, over millions of years, turned into the coal we still use today. In other words, Carboniferous forests literally shaped humanity's energy future. And while all this was happening, something even more fascinating was emerging. The first steps of terrestrial life as we know it. In this abundant environment, amphibians ventured out of the water, exploring the banks of rivers and lakes, while the first amniotes, creatures that laid hard-shelled eggs, began to colonize the drier areas. These little pioneers paved the way for the reptiles and mammals that would come much later. But while these creatures adapted and evolved, there was another force dominating the ecosystems: giant insects and their arthropod relatives. Imagine walking through a prehistoric forest, surrounded by immense trees, while creatures like the Arthropleura, a 2-meter millipede, crawl along the ground, and giant dragonflies like the Meganeura fly overhead. The environment was a true theater of evolution, with predators and prey playing their roles in a delicate balance. The weather also played a crucial role in this story. During the Carboniferous, the world was predominantly tropical, with mild temperatures and constant humidity. This climate stability, combined with the high level of oxygen in the atmosphere, created the ideal conditions for the emergence of incredibly complex ecosystems. It was as if the entire planet was conspiring to produce diversity on a scale never seen before. But, like everything in nature, there were tensions. Life prospered, but it also faced challenges. While some species adapted successfully, others disappeared, unable to keep up with the rapid pace of evolution. This dance between creation and extinction shaped ecosystems in ways that still resonate today. Now stop for a moment and connect this to our own world. Think about how our tropical forests, like the Amazon, play an essential role in regulating the climate and maintaining biodiversity. Just like the Carboniferous, these forests are the beating hearts of the planet, but they are also under constant threat. Lessons from the past show us that life's balance is fragile and that small changes can trigger huge impacts. And speaking of impact, if you've made it this far, it's because, like us, you're also fascinated by the incredible history of our planet. Don't let this journey end now. Subscribe to the channel, activate the bell so you don't miss any chapter of this story, and like this video to help us bring this message to even more people. Because the Carboniferous was not just the beginning of the history of giants, it was the beginning of something much bigger, the history of all of us. Can you imagine a world where danger didn't come from animals with sharp claws or huge teeth, but from creatures that could fly over your head or glide silently across the forest floor? In the Carboniferous period, this was not imagination, it was reality. And what you will discover now could completely change the way you see these ancient rulers of the planet. The Carboniferous skies were not just a blue void punctuated by clouds. They were ruled by winged predators who had never faced competition. Among them was the Meganeura, a giant dragonfly whose wingspan of up to 70 centimeters made it one of the largest flying insects in history. Unlike modern dragonflies, which are more observant and withdrawn, Meganeura was a voracious hunter. Its sharp jaws could easily pierce the exoskeletons of other smaller creatures, and its ability to maneuver in the air made it a terror of the heavens. But what would happen if you, as a viewer, crossed paths with one of these creatures? The sound of their wings would be deafening, like an approaching storm. And if that wasn't intimidating enough, its low-flying flight and precise strikes would make anyone question its safety on dry land. And don't think that the dangers were restricted to the skies. On the forest floor, the Arthropleura reigned like an earthly giant. This prehistoric millipede could reach an impressive 2 meters in length. With its segmented body covered in armored plates, it looked more like a war machine than a living creature. Although recent studies suggest that Arthropleura was herbivorous, its presence was intimidating enough to ward off potential predators. Now ask yourself, what would it be like to share an environment with such a creature? And the predators didn't stop there. On the ground and in the shallow waters, the Pulmonoscorpius, a giant scorpion that could reach 70 centimeters in length. Imagine the scenario. A scorpion with huge eyes that detected even the slightest movement and a tail equipped with a sharp, potentially poisonous stinger. Unlike modern scorpions, Pulmonoscorpius was among the largest land predators of its time, hunting amphibians, amniotes, and even other giant arthropods. Now, let's take a break. Have you ever wondered why these creatures grew so big? Why did nature, generally efficient, allow the emergence of such disproportionately large beings? The answer doesn't just lie in the abundance of oxygen, which we discussed earlier. Another crucial factor was the absence of competition. In the Carboniferous, winged insects were the only animals capable of flight. This meant that they had unrestricted access to food and territories that no other being could explore. On the ground, the absence of larger predators gave creatures like Arthropleura and Pulmonoscorpius absolute dominance of their ecosystems. But not everything was so simple. These giants had their vulnerabilities. Their enormous bodies required constant resources to survive, and any change in the environment, whether a drop in oxygen levels or the arrival of new competitors, could threaten their existence. And as we know today, this fragility ended up sealing the fate of these colossi. But here's something you might not have considered. What if these giants hadn't disappeared? What would the world be like today if dragonflies the size of falcons still flew the skies? Or if giant millipedes shared the trails of our forests? These questions may seem hypothetical, but they help us understand the impact of these giants on the evolution of life. They shaped ecosystems in ways we can still observe today. Every leaf fallen on a forest floor, every stream that winds between the trees bears the traces of these creatures' struggle, adaptation, and eventual disappearance. And as we move on to the next part of this journey, the question becomes, what can we learn from the giants who dominated the Carboniferous? What does their rise and fall tell us about our own place on this planet? Before we continue, think about this. Giants aren't just a fascinating piece of the planet's history. They're a reminder that in nature, even the biggest and most powerful have a limited time. And like them, we are part of this great narrative. Follow us as we unravel the mysteries of how this world of giants slowly transformed into something much closer to what we know today. Have you ever wondered what really made Carboniferous insects become so gigantic? Was it just excess oxygen? Or was there something deeper, something that science is still trying to understand? Get ready, because what you will discover could completely change the way you see the past, and even the future. When we think about Carboniferous gigantism, the most common explanation points to the abundance of oxygen in the atmosphere. During this period, oxygen levels reached about 35%, much higher than today's 21%. This oxygen-rich environment allowed creatures like Meganeura, the giant dragonfly, and the Arthropleura, the 2-meter millipede, flourished. Why? Because insects' respiratory systems are highly dependent on oxygen diffusion, and with more oxygen available, they could grow much larger than their modern counterparts. But does oxygen alone explain everything? Scientists are beginning to realize that this is just one piece of a much more complex puzzle. Imagine the world of the Carboniferous. Dense tropical forests covered vast areas near the equator, and the environment was rich in resources. The giant trees produced an immense amount of organic matter, creating an incredibly diverse food chain. The giant bugs weren't just predators, They also played fundamental roles in ecosystems, from pollination to nutrient cycling. This means that Carboniferous ecosystems were sustainable enough to support creatures of this size. And there's the first big secret. The environment shaped these giants as much as they shaped the environment. It's almost as if nature was testing the limits of what was possible, creating a perfect synergy between insects and the ecosystems in which they lived. Think about that for a moment. Today, we think of insects as small, often ignored creatures. But in the Carboniferous, they were an essential part of a delicate balance. This balance was so intricate that any change, no matter how small, could have catastrophic consequences. Another crucial piece of this puzzle is the absence of competition. During the Carboniferous, winged insects were the only animals capable of flight. This gave them an incredible advantage, allowing them to explore areas and resources inaccessible to other animals. Meanwhile, on the ground, the absence of large vertebrate predators meant that creatures like the Arthropleura and the Pulmonoscorpius could dominate terrestrial ecosystems. But here's a twist. The lack of competition may have also been their undoing. As amniotes, the first animals with hard-shelled eggs, began to evolve and explore new ecological niches, the Carboniferous giants faced increasingly greater challenges. These new competitors were smaller, more agile, and less dependent on abundant resources. And then comes the big question. If giant insects were so well adapted, why did they disappear? A paleontologist once compared the Carboniferous to a tightrope. Everything seemed to be in perfect balance, but all it took was a slight change for everything to fall apart. And that's exactly what happened. At the end of the Carboniferous, the climate began to change drastically. Tropical forests, which once dominated the planet, began to disappear due to geological events and changes in weather patterns. As the oxygen in the atmosphere decreased, the giants began to succumb. But that wasn't all. As time passed, new predators began to emerge. Gliding lizards and small reptiles, which were faster and more effective in changing environments, began to compete directly with the giant insects. The niches that were once dominated by these colossi were gradually occupied by smaller, more adaptable creatures. And here's a fact that many don't know. The extinction of giant insects was not immediate. It was a slow and painful process that lasted millions of years. Some fossils suggest that smaller species began to emerge, evolving to adapt to new environments as their giant relatives disappeared. Now think for a moment. What does this mean for us? We are living in a world where climate change is once again shaping ecosystems. Are we heading towards another reverse Carboniferous, where Earth's giants, be they trees, animals, or even civilizations, are facing slow decline? In the end, the secret to the gigantism of Carboniferous insects is not just oxygen or the absence of predators. It's in the delicate dance between evolution, environment, and competition. It's a reminder that, in nature, nothing is permanent, and that even the greatest and most well-adapted can fall in the face of inevitable change. If you've made it this far, it's because, like us, you understand the importance of learning from the past to understand the present and shape the future. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and like this video to help this message reach even more people. Because the story of the Carboniferous giants is not just about the past. It is a warning of what is yet to come. What if I told you that giant bugs never really disappeared? That the lessons left behind by these colossal creatures are still alive, shaping the world around us? Now is the time to close this story, and to understand what it means for the future of our planet. The Carboniferous giants may be gone, but their fossil footprints and the impact they had on Earth are indisputable. They pioneered complex ecosystems, shaped the evolution of predators and prey, and, for a brief moment, challenged the limits of life as we know it. But as we've seen, his fall was as epic as his rise. As oxygen levels declined and competition increased, the age of giants gave way to a new order. What remained were smaller, adaptable, and resilient descendants, modern insects. And this is where we encounter one of the greatest ironies of natural history. While the giants of the past have disappeared, today's insects have become the undisputed kings of biodiversity. With more than 1 million species cataloged and millions yet to be discovered, they are, in fact, the heirs to the legacy of the Carboniferous. Think about it. Without insects, life-sustaining ecosystems, including our own, would simply collapse. The story of giant insects is not just a tale of rise and fall, is a powerful metaphor about change, adaptation, and survival. And if we look closely, we will see that it resonates deeply with the challenges we face today. As we explore the past, it becomes clear that the balance of life is incredibly fragile. Just as Carboniferous forests supported the giants, our rainforests, oceans, and farmlands support everything we know. But what happens when we break this balance? Are we prepared to face the consequences of a changing planet? And here's the most important point. Giant insects didn't disappear for a single reason. It was a slow collapse triggered by a combination of climate change, competition, and evolution. And this is a direct warning for us, because like them, we are also dependent on the delicate balance of nature. In 2020, scientists discovered a fossil of the largest dragonfly ever recorded, hidden in a bed of coal. When the fossil was analyzed, they found something surprising: traces of molecules that suggest the creature grew quickly in an environment of abundance, but died under harsh conditions. It's a physical reminder that even the most impressive beings are at the mercy of the environment in which they live. This fossil is a window into the past, but also a mirror of our present. Just as the Carboniferous giants faced a changing world, we too are entering a new era, one where our actions directly shape the Earth's future. So what have we learned from giant insects? We have learned that greatness, whether in size or impact, comes with responsibilities. We learned that adaptation is essential for survival. And above all, we learned that the history of our planet is a story of resilience, but also of limits. The Carboniferous left us a legacy, a planet that continues to evolve and surprise. It is up to us to decide how this legacy will be carried forward. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you for following this journey into the past. But this story doesn't end here. She stays with you. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss the next chapter of this incredible series. Leave a like if this content aroused your curiosity and share in the comments. Which part of this story impressed you the most? Your participation is essential so that we can continue exploring the mysteries of our planet. And together, we can ensure that more people understand the importance of protecting our world. A world that, even millions of years later, still bears the marks of the giants that once ruled it. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. Until then, World Map.